Hello, I'm Dango Rose. Welcome to the Mountaineer Podcast, where everybody's listening. The Mountaineer brings you the latest news of the Peak to Peak region, in print, online, through our podcast, social media, and special publications. Now, listen in to the latest news of the area with our local journalists.
I went to sleep and dreamed of you and that shiny house that we once knew.
The song that you are currently listening to is called Shiny House. It's taken from the latest album released by Timothy Merkel, All Boats Rise, which you can find along with his debut album Orion's Expedition wherever you get your music. Tim Merkel is once again hosting a monthly open mic at the Old Gallery in Allens Park. Be sure to head to 14863 Colorado Road 7 in Allens Park every third Friday of the month, starting Friday, May 16th for an open mic night at the Old Gallery. In-person signups start at 6 p.m. and the music starts at 6:30 p.m. For more information about Tim Merkel, be sure to head to his website at timothymerkel.com.
You never liked the windows, they weren't airproof, but we put in 220 and replaced the roof. It wasn't enough. What was enough? Would someone please define enough?
Hello there, everybody. My name is Jamie Lammers, and welcome to the Mountaineer Podcast, where today I am bringing you the third and final local poetry spotlight of 2025, transitioning from the month of April, National Poetry Month, into the month of May. Before we get into today's interview, though, our preliminary announcements. If you're interested in subscribing to the Mountaineer and getting news from peak to peak, then be sure to head to our website at themtnear.com and click on the subscribe button in the top right corner of our homepage. From there, you'll get full access to our digital archive and scanned copies of the physical newspaper. And you can choose to send a physical subscription to your mailbox or to the mailbox of someone that you love. If you're interested in joining the paper or the podcast in any capacity, including getting advertising in the paper and or podcast, then be sure to email me at media@themountaineer.com and or our editor-in-chief, Barbara Hart, at info@themountaineer.com, and we'll get something sorted for you. We're especially looking for new voices and DJs to join us for our current season, Season 5 of the Mountaineer Podcast. So be sure to email media@themountaineer.com and or info@themountaineer.com to express your interest. And finally, some promotional announcements brought to you by the Mountaineer.
Looking for a unique advertising opportunity? The Mountaineer Podcast may be a perfect fit for you. Our podcast reaches local listeners at least 3 days each week. We can create your podcast commercial for you, or you can submit your own. Contact Amanda McDonald for additional information. Her email is adsales@themountaineer.com, and her cell is 720-960-2900. Have you checked out the Mountaineer YouTube lately? We are very excited to have a videographer intern this spring, as well as Clementine Miller, who's been working hard to record some of our local events and meetings to share with you. Go check it out on the Mountaineer YouTube. Have you seen our 2024 Peak to Peak Visitors Guide? We have just launched our 2025 Media Kit for the next guide. Go to our website and click on Advertise to see the full media kit there. Spring is springing, and we all know that means the flowers will be popping out all over the place, reminding us of beautiful art. That also means it's time to start thinking about the 2025 studio tour. Go to our website and click on special sections to view the 2024 guide and prepare yourself for this year's edition.
All right, now let's get into our third and final local poetry spotlight of 2025. Our guest today, do you mind introducing yourself real quick?
Yeah, my name is Leaf. My last name is Running Rabbit. What else would you like to know?
Well, I'll start by asking this. When did you move to the Peak to Peak area, and how long have you lived here? I conducted this interview with Leaf at his current place of residence.
Well, I've lived here on this property for 34 years. It's a 100% off-grid property. There's no public utilities or anything out here. So it's a solar home. It's a straw bale home that I built myself. It's a ceremonial grounds. I've been running sweat lodge and other ceremonies here for nearly all that time. I originally moved onto this property when I discovered an abandoned, what's called a squatter's shack, left over from the mining days. Just an old cabin that miners would throw up and live in, sort of camp in while they did mining. Then they would move on. And so these cabins were kind of scattered throughout the Rocky Mountains. And if you were lucky enough to find one and you were brave enough to move into the thing, if you got away with living there for 7 years, and at that time there was a law in place in Colorado that gave you squatters' rights. So I managed to live in the cabin here on this property for 17 years before being caught. I raised 2 children here and had a wife, and after they caught me here, then they forced me to either move or to build a house to legal code, which is how this house came to be. 2009 is when I got this certificate of occupancy. I've lived in the cabin on the property longer than this house, but I've lived in this house since 2009. And yeah, built it myself, and it's 100% off-grid. I have a well and a leach field and a solar electric system and a battery bank that stores my power. And I have to pay really close attention to the sun and clouds, my use of energy here.
And when did you start really getting into writing poetry?
Well, I've been writing most of my life, but I think in 1997 or something, I learned that CU Boulder was short on their quota for quote-unquote minority categories of people. And since I have what's called a CDIB card, which stands for Certificate Degree of Indian Blood, they offered me free education there. So I went to 5 years at CU Boulder for free and got a degree in poetry, and I double majored in Spanish. So mostly my writing pertains to the teaching of consciousness and spiritual well-being and ceremony life. So most of my writing revolves around helping people awaken to that part of them that transcends their identity as a person.
So what kind of poetry have you primarily focused on over the years? And how much has it been influenced by the Peak to Peak area in general?
The writing is a term that I've coined. It's called photopoetics. So in my travels of hiking and skiing all over the Rocky Mountains and traveling the world, I take photos. And with each photo comes a poem. And they each say what the other can't. So a picture says a lot in visual. In the photo that you see, it says a lot. But it can't say what words can say. And vice versa. The poem related to each photo says in words what the photo can't say. So they complement each other, thus the term photopoetics. So poetry to me is a word articulated way of saying something that goes beyond words. True poetry in my mind is an artistic expression of words that transcends your average everyday vocabulary. So that's something that people struggle with a lot, I think, is being really well articulate and using words in a way that paints a picture or an emotion or a feeling of transcendence or spirituality. Oftentimes things like photos or a sunset, let's say, or a sunrise do these things. They take people to that place of awe, and they don't really know why a sunrise can make them feel awestruck. But a poem can do that too, if the words are put together in such a way that it evokes a feeling of awe or sublime or transcendence, spiritual, godliness, things like that. So that's what inspires me about poetry. My gift to this world is words and the use of words and helping point people in a direction of the wordless. So things like spirituality and enlightenment and consciousness is a place that's beyond words. But if you can use words to help open a person's awareness to that possibility, then that's my gift. That's what I like to do. So that's the inspiration behind the poetry.
Are there any particular poetic influences that have stuck out to you over the years?
Yeah, when you study poetry in a college setting, you learn dozens and dozens of different poets through history, but none of them really stood out to me too much. I think the people who stood out to me the most and been the biggest inspiration in my life, whether it's poetry or otherwise, are the spiritual masters, the teachers, what we call the master teachers of spiritual awakening, or what some people may call as gurus. These are people who have the ability through their words to point people in the direction of a possibility about themselves that they were unaware of, which generally means to transcend their identity as a person. So we grow up and become conditioned in this world as an identity. My identity as Leaf, as an American, as a male, as a whatever religion, as tall or short, as handsome or ugly, or smart or dumb. All of these they're like costumes in my mind that limit us. And so most people live their entire lives as an identity, as a person, as a condition. And my passion in life is to help people awaken to the possibility that they are actually a lot more than a person. A person, in my mind, is not much more than a belief system. Like I said, it's a costume or it's a layering of an identity over what they actually are. What we actually are is a conscious presence. We are the perceiving consciousness. What we came here as a baby. For example, when a person comes out of their mother's womb, they are not a person in that moment. They have no idea of gender or nationality or religion or race or anything like that. They're simply pure awareness. It takes a lot of time for the baby to adopt their identity as a person, to adopt their name, to adopt their body as a tool, to learn how to use that tool, that body, to walk, to crawl, whatever. It takes a lot of time to adopt these things. I'm more interested in what we come here as before the person. So a person is actually secondary to every single human being. What is primary is their conscious presence, what they came here as. So that's what my poetry is really aligned toward. So if a person was to read back through the years of my social media and read all the poems, nearly every single poem touches on this fact. It points people towards their presence and exposes them or opens their awareness to something that was primary, something that came before their adoption of their persona.
Something really engaged me personally about the idea of the conscious being separated from the person, the identity. And so I wanted to ask Leaf more about this. Has that separation of conscious being and person been the way you've always seen the world?
No, it's something that slowly evolved over time. When I moved to Colorado from Oklahoma, I was fully a person, fully an identity, just like everyone else. But when I stumbled upon this forest and the squatter's cabin, I learned about something called place. Place is something that I had never considered before finding this land. Place refers, in my mind, to something that has to do with the setting of the land. There's an ancestry, a memory to the land. There's an energy to the land. There's a memory of the ancestors who once lived on this land. There's an energy to the plants and the animals and the smells and the winds and the trees, etc., the movements of nature. All of these things resonated with my being in a way that I had never experienced before. An easy way to summarize that is that when I first walked into this land, I had this overwhelming feeling of walking into my own body for the first time. It was like walking into the essence of who I was. And I felt at home here. I felt a feeling of belonging. And that's another concept with place and consciousness, is that as people, as persons, we're constantly doing our best to fit in. We're fitting in with our peers, the judgments of others. Are we doing things right or wrong? Do we look good? Are we smart? Do we have the right job, etc.? It's a process of fitting in. But as conscious presence, there's no such thing as fitting in. It's a feeling of belonging all the time. And that feeling of belonging is very empowering to the presence of a person. So it takes a lot of energy to be a person because we're constantly hemorrhaging that energy all around, trying to fit in. But as presence, we know, just like a tree doesn't fit in, nor does a deer or a flower or a cloud. They belong. And we have this right as well as a human being to understand that we don't have to fit in anywhere because we already belong everywhere. Just like a tree, we belong. And that's the feeling of place. When we discover place, everything is easier because we feel a sense of belonging. Before I moved here in Oklahoma, I could not find my place. I couldn't find my tribe of people. Couldn't find my group of friends. I couldn't find the right job. Life was like a struggle. It felt like an uphill battle all the time. Once I came here and discovered my place, suddenly life became easier. I noticed that I resonated with everyone and everything and everyone resonated with me. And so this sense of place empowered me in a way to inspire me. And that inspiration came out in ceremony and in writing, in poetry. And so the inspiration behind the poetry comes from that long-winded tale of discovering place.
So how in general have you been able to communicate spirituality with others outside of your poetry and your other writing?
Well, at first it started out through the writing, by writing poetry that was inspired toward conscious presence and articulating things that pulled heartstrings in people. It made them resonate with a feeling, a truth with them that they hadn't ever known how to express or articulate or even recognize. Again, they might feel that like during a sunrise, a feeling of awe, a feeling of inspiration. But they don't really know how to define where that came from. What are the mechanics that made them feel that feeling of awe? And so through words and poetry describing conscious presence and expanded awareness, those words, the poems inspired people. And people would respond to the poetry and want more. And they would ask for more. And that let me know that the words were doing something. It was having an impact on the world at large. And then that led into small ceremonies, like facilitating just an acknowledgement of an equinox or a solstice, let's say, or a birthday or a wedding, and then eventually a sweat lodge, eventually coming of age and transition ceremonies and naming ceremonies for children. And so that I started doing like small ceremonies just for my personal small friend group. And they would go back to their lives after the ceremony and tell their friends and family. And next time they would bring them. And in that way, the ceremonial circle grew and people started asking for more ceremony. And then a local resort here in Ward called Gold Lake Mountain Resort and Spa heard about my ceremonies and asked if I would do sweat lodges for their guests. So I started doing that. Then I started getting calls from schools. Then I started getting calls from people to do a wedding. Then I started getting asked to make ceremonial tools, which is a lot of what the art you see here is about doing ceremony, like a wing fan behind you or that turtle shell medicine bag behind you. All of these are ceremonial tools that have some representation not only to ceremony but to your spiritual growth and awakening. And so mysticism, and it runs in my family. My grandmother, who's the painter of all these paintings, was a mystical artist, and my uncle is a sculptor and is a shaman and a ceremonialist. And so I started paying more attention to that and to them and to that heritage in my bloodline. And I started asking them more questions about, why do you do this? How do you do it? What are you doing? And in that way, I started self-teaching myself and understanding the energetic mechanisms of what is ceremony, what is spiritual awakening. Because I'm not a person either who likes to be in the realm of woo-woo or frou-frou. I like to work within the realm of very real, very grounded, something I can actually point to through science, through physics, not some ethereal thing that is untouchable, but something that people can really grasp and use sustainably for their well-being without needing some rainforest or special frog or some special medicine man. But how can you in the middle of Denver in some shitty apartment be sustainably happy and well-being and have a connection with something beyond yourself, something like what people might call God or spirit or whatever? I had a deep yearning and longing to understand, what are all these things? What do they mean? How do they apply in a very practical way to our day in and day out life? How can I have ceremony while I'm sitting on the toilet or washing the dishes or sweeping the floor? Because most people can't go to some rainforest in Peru and seek out a special frog or medicine man. They need ceremony right here. Our world is struggling right here, right now, in day-to-day life? And how can the homeless person even have a connection to a power that's beyond them as a person? How can they be happy? How can everyone be happy? And not just for the moment of a ceremony, not just for the moment of a mushroom trip, not just for the moment of an orgasm and sex, but how can they have sustainable well-being and happiness day in and day out all the time? That was still is my passion, what I'm aiming to point people toward. You can't give people these things though. You can't give a person an aha moment. They have to discover it on their own. And so my poetry and my teachings or my ceremonies is nothing more than a pointing towards something, a possibility that they may not have seen before. That spirituality is not some fantasy, that healing is not some stumbled upon accidental thing or a gift from God, that healing is up to us. It's our responsibility to heal, to be happy, to choose to be happy.
So I assume that's what you hope people will take away from your practices in spirituality and your writing in general. Finding more awareness in yourself in general.
Yeah. The goal of the writing is to awaken something within each person that makes them feel inspired enough that they can't forget it. It's like learning to ride a bike. Once you learn to ride a bike, you don't forget that. It's different than language. Language is a use it or lose it proposition, like my learning Spanish. If I don't use Spanish, I'll forget how to use it. But riding a bike is not that way. Once you learn how to ride a bike, you forever know how to ride a bike. I find that spirituality and spiritual awakening is the same as riding a bike. Once you taste just one drop out of the bucket of unlimited conscious presence, you never forget that. You're inspired by it always. And it starts a churning in your mind, in the reader's mind, that will not stop. Metaphorically speaking, it turns on their switch to spirituality. Or another way to say that is it turns on their switch to curiosity. Curiosity is a very important thing to inspire in people. Beyond belief system. I'm a person who no longer believes in belief. Belief is not required. It's not an absolute necessity of well-being. Once you believe, let's take heaven and hell, for example. If you believe in heaven and hell and that's it, your switch to curiosity is turned off. You're done exploring what's possible in this universe because you're set on heaven or hell. That's belief. It turns the switch off. But if you're willing to admit that you don't know, then your curiosity switch is still on and you're open to everything that's possible in this universe. And therefore you have the possibility alive in you of things that you may have never even imagined or dreamed true. We have no proof that this is not heaven right here and we're here screwing it all up. We have no proof that that's not the case. So curiosity is very important to spirituality. It's okay if you want to believe in heaven or hell or Christianity as a possibility, as long as it doesn't turn the switch off and you're still open to explore everything that's possible in this universe. This is a very big universe. There's a lot of possibilities out there.
At this point, the interview is coming to a close. There's a question I'm interested in asking, not just as a journalist, but as an individual. How have you generally been able to navigate the burdens placed on us as people? As you've been talking about throughout this whole interview, identities end up taking a lot of anxiety and stress, and those burdens can get to us over time. They've especially gotten to me. And so I can't help but wonder, how have you been able to navigate those burdens? Do you feel that you are someone who can shake some of those burdens off?
Well, before I answer that specifically, let me turn it around real quick and just ask you a difference between how you were feeling when you first walked in here versus how do you feel now?
Even though I always try to stay excited and invested during my interviews, I try to separate any other personal outside stresses I might have from all of my interviews. In this particular case, that did not end up happening. Navigating the back roads to get to the interview while thinking about other external stresses going on in my life got to me on my drive over there. And by the time I arrived for the interview, I could not hold back my stress. I told Leaf, verbatim, I am a very anxious person. I was visibly stressed and flustered. And in the 20 minutes or so from the start of this interview to where we are in the interview now, I had calmed down significantly.
That didn't take that much time, did it? You came in here in a whirlwind of chaotic energy and stress and anxiety because you were connected to the thoughts of your mind and being a person. Now, when you brought that energy in here, I could have attached to that or let that energy affect mine if I also did not know the difference between person and presence. If I identified as a person, then I would have been like, oh my God, what do I do for him? He's freaking out, it's making me freak out, etc. But over years of identifying and deepening my identity with presence, I'm fully aware that you were just connected to your mind in that moment, and I can remain in my presence. And my presence will open up and help take some of your anxiety and just calm it down to the point where once you feel safe and that you feel like you belong and that there's no judgment there, there's no criticizing, judgment, or blame, you're allowed to relax into your sense of belonging. You seem 100% different right now than you were just 5 minutes ago. So that's an example of what conscious presence can do for a person. In my life, there's no such thing as anxiety. You see, healing, suffering, anxiety, stress, these are all things of the person. Conscious presence doesn't have any of that. I like to use this teaching called the coin of the human being. One side of the coin is human, or person. The other side of the coin is being, or presence, human being. We can't get rid of either side of the coin, but we can give our power to, if we're not thinking about it, if we're unaware, we're going to give all of our attention to the side of the coin that is what? The person, the human. And so to become aware that there are two sides to your coin, that you have the human side, yes, that's the belief system of person, but there's another side. It's the being side, presence. That side is where all the power resides. That side is where all the sustainable well-being resides. Peace resides. Love, God, unlimited. Your most innate nature is your being, not your person. And so it's a daily practice to constantly turn back to presence. Always turn back to presence. It's not like I never get angry or have a mood or get grumpy or feel bad. I'm also a person. Everyone is. But with constant attention to recognizing, oh, you're being a person right now. Take a breath. Turn back to presence. It becomes more habitual over time. And then becomes faster and faster and faster over time, to the point where at this time in my life, at 55 years old, it's much easier to remain in presence even under the strain of someone else's lack of presence. And that's not meaning to be a criticism towards you or anyone else. It's just that we either have the awareness or we don't. But one thing to know is that our ego not meaning arrogance, ego meaning our conditioned person. Our ego is never going to get tired and say, you know what, Jamie, I've given you enough trouble for 25 years. I think I'll give you a break. No. The ego does its job very well. It's always fighting to be in the driver's seat of our lives. We have to be aware enough to put the ego in the back seat and put our conscious presence behind the driver's wheel of our lives. Then we know that we still have the ego, it's there, but what's the leading cutting edge through which we move through this life is not our person anymore, but our conscious presence. That's where sustainable well-being resides. That's where the power of happiness, peace, love, that's where all that resides. And that is the power and sense of belonging. We came here belonging. We set the belonging down and moved into fitting in when we adopted our body and mind, the person of us, the persona, the personality. That's not what we really are. We're really conscious presence. And you've experienced that in just a short amount of time.
Thank you so much, Leif, for taking time out of your day to sit down with me and do this interview with me, and especially for allowing me to settle, as stressed as I was. You can learn more about Leif Running Rabbit by heading to his Instagram at WildBee. That's WILDBE. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in to the final local poetry spotlight of 2025 for the Mountaineer and the Mountaineer podcast. I'll be back within the next day with last week's Music of the Mountains episode. In the meantime, if you want to share this episode or others around with whoever you see fit, then be sure to head to the mtnear.com and scroll near to the bottom, or head to our podcast's home base at the mtnearpodcast.buzzsprout.com to see a full archive of all of our episodes. Be sure to reach out to info@themountaineer.com and or media@themountaineer.com if you're interested in being involved in the paper and or the podcast. And finally, for all of our most important links, including our Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube channel, be sure to head to an individual episode description of our podcast, where you can also send us a text. We'd love to hear from you about whatever you think of the paper and or the podcast. I'll see you guys next time with the next episode. Have a great rest of your day.
My thoughts go down to the canyons. They're as deep as my love for you. This love I shall not abandon. I wouldn't know how to.
The song that you are currently listening to is called I Wouldn't Know How To. It's taken from the latest album released by Timothy Merkel, All Boats Rise, which you can find along with his debut album, Orion's Expedition, wherever you get your music. Tim Merkel is once again hosting a monthly open mic at the Old Gallery in Allens Park. Be sure to head to 14863 Colorado Road 7 in Allens Park every third Friday of the month, starting Friday, May 16th, for an open mic night at the Old Gallery. In-person signups start at 6 p.m. and the music starts at 6:30 p.m. For more information about Tim Merkel, be sure to head to his website at timothymerkel.com.
My thoughts go up to the mountains and climb on their heights with me. Then they go down to the forest, as green as my envy. So who's been feeding you these lines, quoting chapter and verse? There's no love as strong as mine, for better or worse.
And that's it for our show. Subscribe online to get more access to more news, weekly updates to our community calendar, and a link to our YouTube channel by visiting themountaineer.com. Be sure to use the coupon code PODCAST when subscribing for a 10% discount, only available to our listeners. If you are in the local Peak to Peak area, be sure to pick up a print edition of The Mountaineer at a local business. I'm Dango Rose. Thank you for listening.